It had rained all morning, the kind of rain that sticks to your skin like sorrow. I sat by myself on the edge of the beige couch. My black dress was wet at the hem, and there was still a strong lily scent. My husband Thomas was gone in an instant after the funeral, when friends and distant family had paid their gentle condolences and disappeared back into their own lives. 22 years of marriage reduced to a framed picture and a coffin buried in muddy earth. I hadn't shed a tear at the cemetery or the service. A feeling of numbness enveloped my chest like a second skin. I wrapped my fingers around a half-empty glass of wine and gazed at our wedding photo on the mantel. At 43, I was a widow and didn't know how to feel. When the knock came, there were 3 gentle taps. My son Ethan had gone to spend the night with friends because he couldn't bear the weight of the silence at home, and I couldn't blame him. I felt a chill go up my arms as it was almost dusk, and I approached gingerly to the door, unsure of who might arrive at this point. He was there when I opened it. The best buddy of Alex, Ethan, was standing there, his coat drenched, his eyes rimmed in blood. The young man who used to sleep on our couch, raid our refrigerator, and laugh uncontrollably at horrible movies was still in my memory, even though he was now 24. "Hello, Mrs. Bennett," he began in a thick voice. "I'm sorry I missed the funeral. I was out of town when I heard." I nodded, unsure of what to say, but the sadness in his eyes drew me back to the present. He had gotten taller, broader, and more defined. I stepped aside without giving it much thought, but might I come in for a minute? Slowly entering as though he didn't quite belong and wasn't sure if he should be here, he sat down and turned to face me as though he had more to say than "I'm sorry." We spoke, or rather, he did. Though there was something odd about the way he said it. He told me how Thomas was a father figure and mentor to him. He was respectful, but there was also conflict in his tone. "I always looked up to him," he muttered, his jaw set as he stood at the hearth. Then he paused. "But people aren't always what they seem." He looked at me, and even though I didn't fully grasp the statement, it still hit me hard. His eyes met mine, and there was a gap in his sentence that lasted longer than necessary. "If you ever want to talk, I'm here." I was aware of it. A change occurred that I couldn't immediately identify, but it made the quiet between us seem heavier than the words we had exchanged. As I shut the door after him, I became aware of something horrifying. My anguish had only just started, and I had trouble falling asleep that night. Every creak in the old home reverberated more loudly than it ought to have. Thomas's absence was now more than simply emotional. It was also bodily. It seemed like a frigid, vast canyon on his vacant side of the bed. I couldn't stop thinking about Alex's statement that people aren't always who they seem. It sounded as a warning. I was standing in front of Thomas's closet at 2 in the morning, running my fingers over his old watch and stroking the sleeves of his suits. He could have come in at any moment to inquire why I was awake, but something inside of me had broken, and I was powerless to stop it now. I discovered a little box in the drawer underneath his clothing, a folded letter with the phrases, "I miss you. I dreamed of you again last night." And it wasn't mine. It wasn't from Ethan. It was written in nice, precise handwriting, but the tone wasn't friendly. It was loving. A woman's voice on paper, I read the same phrases again and over for what seemed like hours, not even recognizing the name at the bottom. If it was a name at all, it was simply an initial S. I was too outraged to cry when the morning arrived quickly and harshly. I had no idea that my spouse, whom I had defended, loved, and trusted, had cheated on me. Alex called and asked if he might come by again because he had left something at the house. I replied in the affirmative, but the note remained in my back pocket like a ticking time bomb. When he got there, he appeared different, more composed and confident. I offered him coffee, but he turned it down and instead remained in the doorway, staring at me. Did you know that before I could stop myself? I asked. Regarding Thomas, he didn't act shocked by her. But it wasn't guilt I saw in him. Rather, it was sorrow of a different kind. I believed you deserved peace, he murmured gently. His face stiffened. I knew something I didn't want to tell you. I wasn't sure if it was genuine, but certainly I suspected. You said nothing. He continued, almost whispering, but that's not how I've seen you for a long time. But when I pressed him, he finally admitted, I was jealous of him for having you. At first, the words didn't register, but then they did, and I felt my breath catch. You've been like a second mother to me, he said, adding, although I've seen you for a long time, I just never said anything because it felt wrong. All boundaries between pain and desire from the past and now are still broken in that instant. More than everything, I needed the truth because, for the first time, I wasn't sure who had deceived me more. I wanted to scream and escape. The reason I didn't leave the fire that was now flickering in front of me, or my husband for concealing a love affair. The days that followed blended together in a variety of uncertain and restless questions. Every recollection I had of Thomas began to change. Once harmless conversations suddenly seemed tainted with dishonesty. I started to question how long I had been blind, or worse, how much I had chosen not to see, given his tardy encounters and his quiet remoteness over the past year. I was plagued by the letter. I looked for older receipts, messages, or anything else that may link Thomas to her. But all I could find was silence. That perfect script, that one initial, clear phone records and remove emails. He had been cautious, too cautious. Alex sent another SMS, not demanding or aggressive, simply checking in. I hesitated before responding, but my fingers moved before my thoughts could process it. Something inside of me was restless searching, and I knew I couldn't pretend any longer, so I didn't prepare, clean the house, or put on cosmetics when he came over. He appeared more anxious than before. I asked him the question that had been bothering me since his last visit. Why did you really come back? He looked down and then up because I couldn't leave him. We sat across from each other, the air heavy with unsaid tension. His candor disarmed me. There was only genuine emotion, no charm or deceit. He said that ever since he was 17, he had been dreaming about me and that each time he came to our house, he had hoped, despite the fact that Thomas was absent from the photo and that he detested himself for it. There was an odd sense of solace in it. I told him about the letter, and he clenched his jaw. He asked to see it, and when he did, I saw anger flash in his eyes. He once told Ethan that he was out of town with a woman. I knew it wasn't right, but I didn't want to crush your world or cry, but I did. Alex grabbed for my hand every time I stood up for a man who had been gradually replacing me without saying anything, and I didn't stop him because it wasn't comfort I wanted, but truth. His hand was warm and very anchoring, and he muttered softly, I shouldn't be here. I said, neither should I. The kiss wasn't prearranged. Rather, it was reluctant and sorrowful. It was driven by the desperate urge to feel seen once more rather than enthusiasm, to have the sense that I was more than just a role wife, mother, widow, or woman. I didn't know what this meant for a minute, but I knew one thing for sure. All I understood about love, loyalty, and right and wrong was destroyed under the weight of wanting something true. Not because I didn't want to, but because I needed to comprehend what was going on inside of me. I wasn't just mourning a husband. I was mourning the version of myself that felt love was safe and trust was unbreakable. I didn't see Alex for a week after that night because the person I thought I was died the day Thomas did, and someone else was waking up in the ruins. There was no longer any quiet in the house. It was crowded with inquiries. I read the letter again, trying to find clues about when I lost Thomas, but I couldn't pinpoint the exact moment, and perhaps that stung the most. Had Thomas really truly loved me? Or was I just a part of his well-manicured image? That a significant struggle or setback was not necessary. It was a creeping, silent betrayal that was impossible to detect until it was too late to correct. Ethan was quieter than normal when he got home, and he gave me the longest embrace he has in years. I gently asked him if he had talked to Alex, and he said that he hadn't. Alex seems to have grown aloof and unresponsive. Since I was unsure of how to describe the chaos I had entered or how part one now contributed to it, I didn't press. I finally gave Alex a call. We met in a small, quiet cafe where no one would notice that we didn't look like we belonged together. He appeared worn out, his eyes shadowed by something more serious than guilt. He claimed he didn't want to make my life more difficult by claiming that what we shared wasn't fair to either Ethan or me. I told him the truth. I wasn't trying to replace Thomas with him, and I wasn't looking for a replacement. He reached for my hand again, but this time I pulled back, saying, I need to stand on my own first before I let anyone stand beside me. He nodded. There was no drama, no pleading, just an understanding that perhaps we were two people who crossed paths at the wrong time, or perhaps we were just what the other person needed to wake up. Thomas never completed building the garden, so I returned home that evening and sat there. I realized that I was no longer upset after lighting a candle for myself rather than for him. I had just finished preserving a memory that didn't merit the pedestal I had given it. I promised the version of myself that had been silent for too long that she wouldn't vanish again in a letter I wrote the following morning, not to Thomas or Alex. Over the next few weeks, I occasionally saw Alex. Without titles or promises, he simply provided me serenity. I accepted each day as it came. No hurrying, no regrets. Love isn't usually accompanied by fireworks. Sometimes treachery isn't the conclusion of a story. Rather, it's the start of one that is ultimately yours. Other times, it appears after all else has crumbled.